You know, the 1970s was a weird time at the theaters because the biggest movie of the science fiction movie, the late 1960s, was almost into its third sequel. And the public, not say turned against it, but what was expected to be a big hit to the box office ended up being, for some, a confusing mess. And in the black community in certain parts of North America, it was seen as kind of a blaxploitation movie because the basic plot is the apes were being held down by the white power structure. And if you're a black person in the 1970s, the white power structure was holding you down definitely at every level, socially, economically, entertainment. So today we're talking about, in my opinion, one of my favorite movies of the 1970s, even though there's plot holes galore. We'll get that to a second. Now, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is a American science fiction film directed by J. Lee Thompson and written by Paul Dean. It is the fourth of 5 films in the original Planet of the Apes 5-part series produced by the great Arthur P. Jacobs. The film stars Roddy McDowall, Don Murray, and Ricardo Montalban. It explores how the apes rebelled from humanity's ill treatment following escape from the Planet of the Apes. It was followed by Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Now, it's the most comic book, graphic novel movie of the 5, in my personal opinion, because a lot of things that were presented was almost like in graphic novel format, and of course, in the early 1970s, it wasn't like the graphic novels of the 80s and 90s, but if you look at it, the novelization will be pretty perfect. Now, the plot centers in North America in 1991, following a pandemic, no pun, from a space-borne disease that wiped out all dogs and cats in 1983. The government has decided to become a series of police states that took apes as pets before establishing a culture based on ape slave labor, like the slave movement in the States and worldwide from the 1780s to the 1850s. Now, these events were foretold in 1973 as testimony by 2 chimpanzee scientists, by Cornelius, prior to him and his wife Zira being killed. While it appeared their baby was also killed, this was part 3, he evaded death and was secretly raised by the circus owner Armando, again played by Montalban, as a young horseback rider. Now fully grown and named Caesar, or he names himself Caesar, a very famous scene in the movie, Armando brings him to one of the cities to distribute flyers for the circus's arrival, explain to the curious ape the events that led to the new reality, while advising him not to speak in public for fear of his life. Now, this is the big plot hole. He would be told that his parents were murdered by the people of the state. How is he protected by Armando all those years? Why would he go in the middle of Ape Central, or what he call White Power Central, to promote a circus coming in? And what happens to the circus after Armando comes to an end? So anyway, the different plot holes, but let's not get into it. It'll take like 40 hours. Anyway. Now, seeing apes performing various menial tasks and shocked at the harsh abuse inflicted on rebellious apes at a public, not say event, but in public, Caesar shouts out, "Lousy human bastards," after seeing a guerrilla messenger being beaten and drugged. Now, Armando takes the responsibility, and he really acts the hell out of this scene because he said, you know, it's me, and he asks him to say it, and he finally says it in his own voice, and it's more direct than what Caesar ever said in the first place. Now, again, he takes responsibility, and while defusing the situation, Caesar runs away in a commotion. Now, finding Caesar hiding in a stairway, Armando tells the ape that he will turn himself into the authorities and bluff his way out while instructing Caesar to hide among a group of arriving apes for safeties. Now, in the scene, he hides amongst a bunch of I think, orangutans that arrive, and that's a link to him being finally discovered. It's quite an interesting concept, because they were coming in and they're kind of UPC'd, or, you know, how we do a model to show where they come from. Now, Caesar, again, follows the instructions, and like I said, in the cage of orangutans, finding himself being trained for slavery through violent conditioning. Now, Caesar is then sold at auction to Governor Breck, which was coordinated by the great Gordon Jump, Mr. Carlson from WKRP. So see him as a villainous auctioneer 6 years before WKRP is quite jarring, actually. Now, he's allowed to name himself, and he does it by randomly, maybe, pointing to a word in a book handed to him. And this chimpanzee's finger rests upon the name Caesar, feigning coincidence. Caesar then put to work by Breck's chief ape McDonald, who was black. and allows him to sympathize with the apes to the thinly veiled disgust of his boss. Now, Armando eventually becomes captured and becomes interrogated by Inspector Culp, who suspects his circus ape's a child of the two talking apes from the future, or the past. Get it? Culp's assistant puts Armando on a machine, the authenticator, that psychologically forces people to be truthful. Very similar to that Star Trek episode of cleaning the mind. After admitting he had heard the name Cornelius before, Armando realizes he cannot fight the machine and jumps through a window to his death after a brief struggle with a guard. Very, very well done, almost like a night gallery cut. Now, when Caesar learns of the circus owner's death, he loses faith in human kindness and begins secretly teaching the apes combat while having them gather weapons, and all kind of weapons. Knives, screwdrivers, butcher knives, all kind of stuff. Now, by that time, through Culp's investigation that the vessel which supposedly delivers Caesar is from a region with no native chimpanzees, Breck learns that Caesar is the ape they are hunting. He reveals himself to MacDonald after he covered for the ape twice when called by Breck on Caesar's whereabouts. While MacDonald understands Caesar's intent to depose Breck, he expresses his doubts about the revolution's effectiveness, along with Caesar being dismissive of most humans. Caesar is later captured by Breck's men and is tortured into speaking. Hearing him speak, Breck orders Caesar's immediate death. He survives the execution because MacDonald secretly lowers the machine's electrical output well before lethal levels. Once Breck leaves, Caesar kills his torturer and escapes, but he pretends he's being tortured to death, and he attacks him. Now, Caesar then begins his revolution by first taking over ape management to build his numbers, proceeding to the command center with the apes killing most of the riot police that attempt to stop them while setting the city on fire. After bursting into Breck's command post and killing most of the personnel, Caesar has Breck march out to be executed. MacDonald attempts to please Caesar not to succumb to brutality and be merciful to the former masters. Caesar ignores him and in a rage declares, in one of the best soliloquies in the 1970 sci-fi genre, "Where there is fire, there is smoke. And in that smoke, from this day forward, my people will crouch and conspire and plot and plan for the inevitable day of man's downfall, the day when he finally and self-destructively turns his weapons against his own kind, the day of the writing in the sky when your cities lie buried under radioactive rubble, when the sea is a dead sea and the land is a wasteland, out of which I will lead my people from their captivity. And we shall build our own cities, in which there will be no place for humans except to serve our ends, and we shall found our own armies, our own religion, our own dynasty. And that day is upon you now." Just like the Book of Revelation, but in an ape version. Now, as the apes raise their rivals to beat him to death, Caesar's girlfriend Lisa voices her objection, using her newly found voice, shouting no. She's the first ape to speak other than Caesar. Caesar reconsiders and orders the apes to lower their weapons, saying, "But now we will put away our hatred, now we will put down our weapons. We have passed through the night of fires, and those who were our masters are now our servants. And we who are not human can afford to be humane. Destiny is the will of God, and it is man's destiny to be dominated. It is God's will that he be dominated with compassion and understanding. So cast out your vengeance. Tonight we have seen the birth of the Planet of the Apes." Now, Don Murray plays Governor Breck. If you know Don Murray, he's a straight-ahead hero guy, extremely miscast. What he should have done is got kind of, I would say, like a Pat Boone. Because Pat Boone played an evil character in Night Gallery. I would have loved seeing Pat Boone playing an evil character. He could have carried it. But Ricardo Montalban as Armando, he's used a little bit, but he's kind of, the first 30 minutes of this, and a lot of critics said the first 30 minutes of this is just tremendous. But it kind of goes off the rails because it seems a little bit, I don't know, kind of a B-movie style. Now, J. Lee Thompson, who had maintained interest in the franchise, was a stickler for detail in this movie, such as highlighting the conflicts with color. The humans wear black and other muted colors, while the ape suits are colorful, including red and yellow and different flavors. Now, Don Murray suggested that Thompson is wardrobe with a black turtleneck sweater and rehearsing scenes after translating his dialogue into German to get this kind of severe feeling of the Nazis. Screenwriter Paul Den wrote the film incorporated references to racial conflicts in North America during the early 70s, and Thompson further highlighted by shooting some scenes in a manner similar to a news broadcast. Very interesting cinematography. It should have been nominated as one of the best. It was almost like a TV movie pilot. It was tremendous. The primary location, of course, was Century City, Los Angeles, used for different movies and shows that had previously been part of the 20th Century Fox backlot and translated well into the bleak future with monochromatic buildings in a sterile, ultra-modern style. Also used as a shooting location was the University of California, Irvine in Orange County. In addition, TV producer Irwin Allen contributed props and clothes to the film. He let the makers of Conquest borrow his Seaviews jumpsuits from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, brown clothes and computers and cabinets for ape management that were used first on the Time Tunnel, and other sets and props from other Allen productions. Now, because the cinematography for me really is another character, we must say that, just to remind everybody, it was the only entry of the 5 to be filmed in the great Todd AO 35 format using numerous high-def cameras. Now, of course, the other movies were in Panavision, but you could tell at the movie theaters the drive was just tremendous. Now, the original cut of Conquest ended with a very different finale, with the brutal killing of Governor Breck by a bunch of guerrillas hitting him with guns, with an implicit message that the circle of hatred will never end. After a preview screening in all places Phoenix, Arizona, on June 1st, 1972, the impact of the graphic content caused the producers to rework the film, even though they did not have the budget to do so. Roddy McDowell then recorded a compliment to Caesar's final speech, which was portrayed through editing tricks. Caesar being mostly shown through close-ups of his eyes, and the guerrillas hitting Breck with the rifles played backwards to imply they were acquiescing to Caesar's directive of nonviolence and assured a lower rating. The film's Blu-ray version adds an unrated version, restoring the original ending and many other graphic scenes, which is quite an improvement in my opinion. Now, Conquest is the only Apes film without a pre-title sequence. Now, there was also talk that he might follow the script where a night patrol captured an escaping ape and discovered that the body of the ape is covered in welts and bruises as of evidence of severe abuse, which refers to a later scene with Governor Breck. Now, the only problem with this, it would slow down the film because it was only 88 minutes. It was a very quick drive-in style movie. Now, a screenwriter then, who wrote and co-wrote the sequels, said in interviews after the movie was filmed, he's writing what had a circular theme. Part 2 leads to Part 3, Part 3 leads to Part 4, Part 4 leads to Part 5, which kind of leads back to Part 1. You know what I'm talking about. Now, critical reception made, box office first, $4.5 million at the North American box office. Because it was low budget, it was seen to be, a profitable movie. Now, Howard Thompson, no relation, of the New York Times wrote that J. Lee Thompson's direction propels the action in a compact chromium glass setting, and wait till you see the last battle royal. Arthur Murphy of Variety wrote, McDowell is extremely good, as usual, in the Simian character, and Thompson's staging keeps the pace very lively. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune gave it 2.5 stars out of 4, calling it excellent in the first half hour, but found the last action sequences run on too long. Now, Kevin Thomas of the LA Times wrote the film may be the best since number 1, Planet of the Apes. I tend to agree, but that's not saying much. James Franciscus and Sal Mineo getting killed off early in Part 3 really blew it for me in those episodes. Thomas called it a self-contained allegory in which man's cruelty to beasts becomes symbolic of man's humanity to man. It is simple but powerful premise, thoroughly developed with a good balance between the dialogue and action by Dean and splendidly directed by J. Lee Thompson. Claude Jevons of the Monthly Film Bulletin wrote, this comic book adventure is by far cry from the provocative peer-built vision so impressively realized by Franklin Shafter 4 films ago. And in spite of some crude allegorical pretensions, it can't really be considered seriously as more than excused by Appjack to get maximum wear out of an expensive set of costumes. Now, Rotten Tomatoes, 50%. The critical consensus reads, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is as angry and relevant as any of its predecessors, but budget constraints and a stale script robbed its evolution of the scope it requires. Now, for me, it's 3 stars out of 4. The first half an hour quite well, but there's scenes in there that are so memorable, and there's like dark humor as well, where but the Natalie Trundy character, or the beloved of Caesar, is not giving much to do. They should have had recasting the character that played Breck's. Harry Rhodes, a tremendous performance as McDonald is perfect. But like I said, getting a Pat Boone or getting a Robert Wagner. See, Don Murray played this as kind of a poor man's Robert Wagner. But the torturer as well, who show up in part 5, Severin Darden, he's just tremendous. But again, what's really jarring, at the time we didn't know who Gordon Jump was. And when he ended up being, Mr. Carlson for WKRP, the beloved Mr. Carlson, to see him as the evil auctioneer is very jarring. But you got to understand, if you're going to binge anything, start with Planet of the Apes, or not say the shortened version, but I would like to see if there's any B-roll of this, to see if they can be re-edited. I think there's a great movie in here, 3.5 stars out of 4. But you got to understand, this was before Star Wars. All we had for sequels of this level was Planet of the Apes. You had the comic books, or like the black and white comic books. You had the merchandise. We had the children's toys, the mecha, the figurines. It was a groovy time in the 70s. Now, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, look at the graphics that were done that's with this video. It's just tremendous to see the poster. The poster themselves that were done for Conquest, some of the best I've ever seen. Because it feels like a war movie. It's like, the revolt of the apes. But a little bit more bloody violence, a little bit more... And if I'm not mistaken, most of the humans that are killed are all male. So you're telling me in 1991 there's no females in the army? That's stopping the apes? It's kind of bizarre. Do the apes get really violent? Do like rape and pillage? Like it gave the teaser of kind of a more violent movie, but it's an R movie at its heart, but it wants to keep it at a PG. Or seeing somebody's head busted in and like not too much graphic, but when they're going through the city and it's burning, it's a great scene, because the trailer for this movie gives you a movie that doesn't exist. It's so much excitement in the trailer, but when you get to the movie, it's all like psychological. It's Nietzsche and Nazism and Stalinism and holding down to black people. But I know a lot of black magazines and different publications with a black perspective really loved this movie because he gave it to Whitey, he gave it to honkies, right? I think Richard Pryor said once, he said, maybe for 5 minutes I'd like to be one of the apes in Planet. He said he called it Planet of the Apes, meant to say Conquest. But if you're a black man mad at Whitey in the 1970s, this is the movie for you. As an Aboriginal person, like I got it. Because I went to see Conquest of the Planet of the Apes the second time, and let me tell you something, a lot of people left, but a lot of people stayed, and a lot of people stayed were popping their horns when Roddy McDowell basically took over the Planet of the Apes, or like the humans. It was almost like an end of a hockey game. Everybody was cheering. I could hear the cheerings. But you know something, after the first half hour, a lot of people went to drive-in. That's what you did in Canada back in the day. People didn't like a movie, they would leave. So that's the way it goes. Again, Conquest of Planet of the Apes, try to seek it out on DVD, try to seek it out on whatever, I think it's on Disney Plus, I think, I could be wrong, and go from there. And enjoy the Conquest of Planet of the Apes for what it is. It's not the best cheese, but it's not the worst either. It's sort of like half Cracker Barrel, half Black Diamond. So ladies and gentlemen, this is our latest of our screenshots podcast. If you like what we're doing here, give us a like, comment, subscribe. What are your thoughts and memories of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes? I'd like to hear your Simian and non-Simian views. Thanks for listening. Bye.